Westworld Season 3 Episode 2 The Winter Line has been released, and I'm going to be giving you my recap and explaining the episode along with presenting an overall review. There will be spoilers for episode 2 in this video, so if you have not seen it, I'd advise to watch the episode then return for my analysis. In The Winter Line, we got a reintroduction of Maeve, Bernard arriving back at Westworld in the hope of finding her, and the return of some favourite characters, even if they won't be back for the remainder of this season. It was mainly an episode to show the potential forming of an opposition against Dolores and her plan to start a revolution, along with the portrayal of a familiar plot point of breaking out of set narratives. I'm intrigued to see how this relates to the rest of the season and also where we go from the end of this episode. Before I get into the video, if you want to see any of my future episode reviews for the rest of Westworld Season 3, along with other breakdowns and theory videos coming this season, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoy this video, give it a like rating. Without further ado, let's dive into Westworld Season 3 Episode 2. So we begin where we left off in episode 1, with Maeve in what appears to be Warworld. This is a new park in the show centred around a military fortification in World War II Italy. As the scene develops, we get the reintroduction of Hector, who at first the audience and Maeve believes to be the same Hector we know and love from the previous seasons. But he's not. When Maeve tells him she's lost her powers, he acts like it doesn't mean anything to him. They end up making a quick escape, but when they come to a plane, they find its entire crew dead. During the scene, Hector ends up calling Maeve Isabella, who, as you remember, was the name Lee Sizemore referenced in Season 2 as being his past love interest. This is who Maeve was based off, with Sizemore also being the inspiration for Hector, or the man he always wanted to be. She realises he isn't Hector at all, or he has no longer any memory of their exploits or the nature of their reality. Hector ends up being shot by German soldiers who encounter them near the plane, and Maeve shoots herself. She wakes up in the facility area where they dump and later restore the host bodies. One of the techs working on her is revealed to be Felix, and she tries to signal him, but he just walks off with a worried look. She makes her way down the hall and sees Sylvester also, but instead of greeting her, he calls for security. As both techs don't seem to recognise her, things in the episode become very curious. As Delos guards corner Maeve and prepare to shoot her, she picks up a decommissioning drill and prepares to use it. Just as she's about to do so, a familiar voice calls out for her to stop. The voice is none other than Lee Sizemore's, who limps in on a single crutch and shocks Maeve in her believing he had died. Yet for the portion of this episode, here he stands, and he wants to help Maeve reunite with her daughter. He tells her that Warworld is close to the Forge, and that he'll be able to get her to the Valley Beyond. The next time Maeve awakens in Warworld, she tries to get fake Hector to come with her, but he can't abandon his narrative, which is the Resistance. She ends up going alone and meets Sizemore, who is waiting with a pair of horses. They ride on to the Forge. This is the point when Sizemore starts asking too many questions, trying to figure out the coordinates for the server where all the hosts are stored. Maeve realises that Dolores must have hidden it. But then she also realises that Sizemore isn't real, in a scene where he tries to tell her that he's madly in love with Maeve. The Isabella storyline comes back to us here, and they even share a brief kiss. But this is just a fantasy, and so is everything around them, as Sizemore starts to glitch and so does the entire room. This isn't a real version of the Forge at all, it's just a simulation, and one designed to get information from Maeve. When overloading the system, Maeve discovers that it was quickly and cheaply put together. The next time that we enter Warworld with Maeve, she confuses and disrupts all the Germans by placing the secret plans in each of their pockets. The plans that Hector showed earlier on in the episode to her within their given narrative. A massive gunfight breaks loose and the whole thing freezes. Maeve and Sizemore use the frozen simulation to find where Maeve really is, and they are able to see out of the simulation into a room where her memory ball is being stored. They see a facility which holds the Pearl of Maeve and others inside. This is the point where Maeve uses a maintenance drone in the real world to steal her brain and escape. but there are too many guards and they shoot down the robot just outside of the facility. As time passes, Maeve wakes up in a strange environment. She awakens in an exotic mansion of some sort, wearing a new white dress. Here Maeve meets a new character, the character that looks to be in control of the system, the character that Dolores is now after. This is Serac. He says the line that we heard him say in the trailer, that humanity is a little band of thugs stumbling from one catastrophe to the next, until now. He also says that our history is like the ravings of a lunatic, but we've changed that. For the first time, history has an author, a system. This is when we see system initiated and the word Solomon build. The system we know from episode 1 is called Rehoboam. Some people have pointed this out, that in the Bible, Rehoboam was the son of King Solomon, a wise man whose wise rule still ended in revolution and civil war. In my trailer breakdown video last month, I mentioned that I believe this season would show not just the civil unrest between humans when they find out their data is being watched by Insight, but also the potential civil war between the hosts in the near future. This is a theory I've had for a while, and I wouldn't be surprised if we lead into that by the end of this season. But back to the scene. Serac notes that everything was going fine until a divergence occurred that the system couldn't predict. He says, almost certainly referring to Dolores. He tells Maeve that he wants her to track Dolores down and kill her. Maeve, after saying only she will make her own decisions, grabs a knife, and as she points it down, she freezes. Serac has used a device to stop her. While Maeve has become immune to voice commands, this new tech that Serac has used works. He says, we've gotten off on the wrong foot. Perhaps next time we can talk and I can persuade you that our interests are aligned. I'm very intrigued to see what these interests are. I think there needs to be a large motive for Maeve to stop Dolores, one that the audience can get behind and one that feels justified. If I had to take a guess, since they reintroduced a discussion surrounding the Forge, I wouldn't be surprised if Serac has located this and maybe uses it as a reason to make Maeve carry out his deeds. Maeve wouldn't want to risk her daughter or anyone else in the Forge trouble. After all, she sacrificed that in season 2. But we'll have to see. We come to the brief subplot of this episode, which focuses attention on Bernard, who makes his way back to a largely abandoned Westworld. He goes back to the room with all of the Bernard clones and finds Stubbs sitting on a chair with a gunshot wound through his neck and face. He peers down to investigate and suddenly Stubbs awakens. And yes, he was a host all along. Ford designed him to protect the hosts, with Bernard being one of the priorities. We discover that Bernard is back in Westworld to access the tablets in the park so that he can test himself while also looking for Maeve. We obviously saw Bernard in episode 1 trying to communicate with his system, and he had problems, especially with the events that took place at the industrial meat farm. He doesn't trust the tablet outside the park, mainly because Dolores could have corrupted it, or corrupted him. They next go into what appears to be medieval world, or the facilities surrounding it, which humorously includes a shot of Drogon from Game of Thrones, and cameos by fan favourites D.B. Weiss and David Benioff. Yes, that was a joke, but the scene was a nice nod at the expanded worlds of the Delos parks regardless. Here Bernard accesses a tablet and sees memories of fake Charlotte Hale from season 2, who points a gun at him, and along with a moment of her putting some pearls into cases. He's interrupted by Stubbs, who has been fighting off security guards during this, and they eventually escape. They go searching for Maeve, as Bernard thinks she could be the only other host who can help him stop Dolores. At this point in the episode, we think she's actually in the park, but as Bernard and Stubbs find her body in cold storage with her brain missing from the back of her skull, we learn that she's in a simulation. Maeve is gone, and Bernard doesn't have a clue that she's now actually in the real world. We end on Bernard and Stubbs at a shoreline, where Stubbs tells him that he plans to retire himself after Bernard is safely away on the boat. But Bernard freezes him and gives him a new directive: to protect Bernard at all costs. He needs help stopping Dolores, and Stubbs will probably play a hand in not just this, but eventually stopping Serac and the Rehoboam too. Stubbs looks at Bernard when he comes back online with a grimace, saying, "If you wanted my help, you could have just asked for it." They get on a boat and set out to sea back into the real world. From watching this episode, a part of me does wish that we could spend more time in the parks, and also with the characters we became invested in like Lee Sizemore and Hector, and by the way, it was great to see them reappear in this episode. But as I stressed a few videos ago, the park idea is fairly played out at this point, and if anything, Westworld has now been dragged into the real world, and it's time to develop from there. It's definitely opened up a range of new possibilities, and I think the rest of this season has been set up very well by these opening 2 episodes, even if it did dangle the feelings we had of the parks in season 1 and 2 right in front of us. I'm giving Westworld Season 3 Episode 2 a rating of 4 stars. I thought this episode did a great job of reintroducing some of the Delos parks in a way that connected it to the storyline and themes we are seeing evolve in Season 3. I am worried that it may just act as an episode to satisfy fans, but I think that given the discussion of simulations and the ending scene with Maeve and Serac, it will hopefully act as an episode which gives us what we need to know going forward. I like the idea of using a setting that takes place near a World War II military fortification to show not just the reoccurrence of war, but the continuing traps that are left for Maeve and the hosts. What we know is that Insight and Serac definitely have a plan, and a lot of control that Dolores will have to exploit. I also find it intriguing that a side character in episode 1 referenced the idea of a simulation inside of a simulation, and in a certain way the narrative of this episode reflected that. I think what they are trying to relate to is the stark comparison of episode 1's Caleb, who is being mentally crushed by the system in the real world. The question is, what is Serac's extended proposition to Maeve, and why may she end up going along with it? We'll have to see how it plays out, but I'm fascinated by where they are going to go in the coming episodes. So let me know down below what you think of episode 2. Tell me if you picked out anything I didn't, or any predictions you have going forward. I'm very intrigued to hear them. For reviews and recaps of all the upcoming episodes of Westworld Season 3, along with videos on certain topics surrounding this season, subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like rating. Let me know what you thought of the latest episode down below in the comments. Anyway, I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.